So one of the reasons someone might be interested in, even if they don't know the language, but stepping behind the English language into this other world of, the translation and Pali is that they feel like they're getting closer to the Buddha's teachings in a way. And so could you talk a little bit about the relationship between the Pali language, the Pali suttas, and the actual language the Buddha, or languages the Buddha might have used?
Yeah, this is a matter in which there's no clear determination among scholars. There's still a great deal of uncertainty. What was the language that the Buddha actually spoke? But Pali, at least the prevalent opinion among scholars now, is that Pali is a composite language. Maybe you'd call it an artificial language or a lingua franca, created by combining features of a number of dialects that were used in northern India in order to make the teachings intelligible to monastic communities spread out across northern India. The Buddha lived and taught in the northeast part of India, in the states region that now corresponds partly to the state of Bihar and to parts of the state of Uttar Pradesh. These were the states of Magadha and primarily Kosala. And so we might conjecture that the Buddha in his teaching rounds would have used several languages, probably the language that was prevalent in each of these states. But these, we call them different languages, but they're actually in a way dialectical variations on a basic underlying root language. And so one, a little bit like the connection between maybe Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. And so one who knows, I say in the introduction, even if we can't determine the exact language that the Buddha spoke, if we somehow out of a miracle, a tape recording of the Buddha's discourse were to manifest, somebody who knows Pali would be, and the recording were to be transcribed, somebody who knows Pali would be able to understand maybe 95 to 98% of it.
Would that be the same for someone who knows Sanskrit as well?
I would say pretty much so. Yeah, except that in Pali, what happens is that Sanskrit, because it's primarily originally a literary language, it has certain phonological features and grammatical features which are lost in Pali because Pali is based on spoken languages. So Sanskrit has, in terms of the numbers, it has the singular and the plural, like any language, but then it also has dual forms.
Yes.
So where you have two people doing something, you have separate pronouns, verb forms, and so on for two. Whereas in Pali, the dual forms are completely eliminated. They're just absorbed into the plural.
And in the introduction, maybe I'm wrong, but did you say Pali was never a spoken language? It was more
That is the general consensus amongst the scholars of the Middle Indo-Aryan languages.
Yeah.
I would say that Pali in the ancient times was not a spoken language, but it's based on spoken languages. It's a kind of composite from several dialects used in northern India. But Pali did become a spoken language in the sense that it was used amongst erudite monks from different Theravadan countries to communicate with each other. So when monks from Sri Lanka would meet monks from Myanmar, they would, even though they couldn't communicate in either Sinhalese or the Myanmar language, but they would communicate in Pali.
So this is so fascinating. And how do we know all this? And I was hoping you'd talk to a little bit about King Ashoka's edicts and how that sort of gives us a map of, what the different languages were in India. And so could you talk a little bit about that and how we know some of this or think we know some of this stuff?
Yeah, well, the edicts of King Aśhoka were inscribed in the languages in the regions in which the edicts were established. but many of them were established in the region of Magadha. And so from those edicts, we can get an idea of what the Magadhy language was like. And sort of the prevalent view amongst traditional Theravadins, who adhere to a very traditionalist standpoint, is that what the Buddha spoke was, the language that the Buddha spoke was Magadhi, the language of the state of Magadha. But and then they identify Pali with Magadhi. So they say that the Pali language is the language of Magadha, or Magadhi, and Magadhi is the language that the Buddha spoke. But from the edicts of King Aśhoka, we could see that the Magadhi language in Ashoka's time, which would be maybe 100-something years after the Buddha, 150 years after the Buddha, has certain phonological features which are different from those of the Pali language. For example, I believe that the Ashokan edicts have always the sibilant as the form of sh, whereas in Pali, the sibilant is always s.
So closer to Sanskrit in that way.
Well, in Sanskrit, one has three sibilants.
Yeah, the three sibilants.
Sh, sh, and s.
Yeah. Interesting. So if we can sort of go back in time, right? So Magadha is where the Buddha was at, near Bihar and these places that you pointed out. And we've actually got these pillars there with edicts on them written not like 100 years after the Buddha was alive. And if we go there and we can actually there's a representation of the language that was spoken at that time. And then if we compare the Pali with those edicts in those spots, we see it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But then if we go to other places, we see it similar, like in northwestern India. Is that true?
I think that there are some edicts in Western India which show some philological features that are closer to Pali than the language than the Magadhi language. For example, in Magadhi, this is a little technical, but the masculine nominative ends in E, the letter E. It's represented as the letter E, the sound A.
Yeah.
Whereas in Pali, the masculine singular for nouns of the A class is O, like Bhutto Dhammang Bhasati, the Buddha speaks the Dhamma. And then I think I'm not a specialist in the edict, Ashokan edicts, but I believe that some of the edicts established in Western India show the nominative singular of the masculine nouns in A ending in O.
Interesting. So it seems like Pali was more Western, and the Magadhi was obviously to the east.
That's a dominant view.
Yeah.
That Pali has more features typical of the western part of India.
But the point is, if you understood Pali, or if you know Pali and you could go back in time and you could attend the Buddha's discourses, you'd understand 95 to 98% of what was. Yeah. And then that's the main point. And that's why people want to, delve into this beautiful language and that you're actually helping people who don't have the time or the knowledge to go deep into it. They can benefit from, getting past the English and seeing behind it with the way you've set out this book. So I think that's a beautiful contribution.